Alright, this is a reminder of how the cars and other transport task works. I'm going to go through the steps that you need to follow to complete your cartoon cars and other transport. And you need to make sure during this lesson that you actually have all of those finished. You will need in total 3 cars and 2 other forms of transport. The example I've got here is of a car. This is the one that I used as the example in class. First thing you need to do when you open up your full screen sized car is to File, Save As, and make sure that you save it as a paint.net file and that you give it the appropriate file name for your class. The example I'll give you 7J ICT Cars 1, first name and your last name. So you need to make sure you have all of those things: homeroom, subject, the name of the task, in this case cars 1, first name and last name. Your other files will be cars 2, cars 3, transport 1 and transport 2. So you need to make sure that as you save each individual file, you are actually giving them the correct file names, and they must be saved onto your H drive. If they don't go onto your H drive, I won't be able to access them, which means I won't be able to mark them. So same as if you were to leave your work in your locker, that's not handing it into the teacher. If you don't use the correct drive and the correct file names, your work will not be assessed. So now that I've named my file and I've saved it, I can now start the editing task. So the 2 tools that we're using are the rectangle select tool and the move selected pixels tool. So we're going to start with the rectangle select tool, and we're going to be selecting from the top of the screen, or the top of the image, down to the very bottom of the image. And we're going to just select the front of the car in this case and use the move selected pixels tool, clicking on one of the flashing dots. We could use either side. I'll actually start from this side, it makes it a bit easier. And we drag towards the other dot to shrink the area that we've got. We do not use the delete key on any of these sections that we're selecting because it messes up the lines of the image. Now we move on to the next section of the car. We cannot select and squish the wheel sections because then it makes the car look unrealistic. The aim of this task is to create a car that looks real but that we know is not. So I'm going to select the next part of the car over here. Now I've got a part of the wheel accidentally, so I need to reselect it to make sure I only have car body, and I'm going to select this far. Again, go to the move pixels tool. This time we're also going to go from the left hand side and shrink it. Now because I've got a gap in between these pieces, I need to select the area that I've already got. You need to select it very carefully so that you're exactly on the edge of it, otherwise it won't line up or you will end up with a small white band in between. Use the move selected pixels tool and drag it across. We then need to carefully, very carefully, line it up so that there's no gap but that the sides of both parts of the image line up. Click on the rectangle select tool and then just click somewhere on it to deselect, and we can see how the top of the car and the bottom of the car line up nicely and the lines continue around smoothly. Now you need to continue down further on with the car to make the individual pieces smaller, and then you'd also need to do the back. When you have put your whole car back together again and you've made as many modifications as you want, you go back to the rectangle select tool and select just around the body of the car. You might want to have a little bit above and a little bit below, but we don't want very much of the background. We just want the important part of the car. When you have that selected, you go to the image menu and click on crop to selection. That gets rid of all the background and gives us just the car that we want. When you've done that, we're going to use some effects from the effects menu and the artistic section to put the final touches onto our cartoon. You can either use ink sketch or pencil sketch. I'm going to start with ink sketch. And when we first apply that filter, you can see, or that effect, you can see what it does to your picture. Now you have two sliders here that you can play with to vary how much the effect goes on. If you turn them too far back, it starts to look a bit more like the normal car. But you can play around with those until you decide how you're happy with the final look of your car. When you're happy, click OK, and then click on the Save button, or Control S. That is the process for one car. You need to make sure that you have completed 3 cars and 2 other forms of transport. That should have been done last week or the week before, as we did that in class 2 weeks ago. You need to make sure it's finished as your first priority today.